Right, hi John.
Hi, Kenneth.
Right, if you don't mind, if you could tell us a bit about the training and qualifications you've undertaken in order to become the head of sustainability here at Block Architects.
Okay, so basically, it's always been part of my ethos is to have buildings that are valuable in terms of how people use and live in them. So, in terms of being able to live in a building, it's not just about use of it; it's about how you feel in it, the comfort of it. So, when you're designing the building, you're talking about the spaces, and a secondary nature of that is what makes a building comfortable in is the heat, the thermal comfort, the air quality, and things like that. So sustainability is not just about add-ons like PV panels or making walls really thick for insulation. There's a whole plethora of things in there that make a sustainable building. So it's always something I've kind of thought of as really important when I've been going through university. So when I was going through my part three and working at practices that were doing sustainability and they were doing things that I hadn't really thought about. It was like, this is interesting to me. But they weren't taking it any further. They were going to a point where they're like, we've got to that point, we're happy with that. And then I saw there was basically just reading through literature, I came across the Passivhaus Institute and the sort of standards that they came up with. And it hit a nerve with me. I was like, you're sitting there going, well, how can cars be designed to such a high standard? And houses are designed to a standard and it's failing, it's not achieving the targets it's meant to do. So I looked into it, and it's a scientific, it's a physics based solution to
Mhm.
architecture, which sounds really boring, and it kind of, if you're looking at it going, it's not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in drawing nice pictures and things like that. Then
Mhm.
it will be boring,
Mhm.
but it's important
Mhm.
because there's so many things in it. You think I'm making this wall really really thick, and the insulation is great, but the details around it are really poor.
Mhm.
So you're either making the solution that you think's a better building, you're actually making it worse because you're increasing the chances that something will be poorer, like
All right.
mold growth and things like that,
Mhm.
ventilation. Um, so things like that it's always been key to me. So when I came across the Passivhaus Institute, I passed my exam in 2018, which was a very difficult exam. It's an open book exam held um, in a room. At that point in time, it was in a room, and you'd had 5 days of working up to that point, going through different courses and different questionnaires. There was different books. You had to take in a lot of information, and it was the first exam I ever had where it's a negative marking comes into play. So you couldn't just guess the answers; you had to know the answers. And if you didn't know it, you just left it because if you guessed it, you get a negative mark against it. So it was a very difficult experience, but it was a great experience because you got to meet other people within the industry that have a similar mindset as yourself.
Mhm.
Some of them now are kind of like Barbara at John Gilbert's. She's leading the way in terms of what she's doing. So there's been a lot of movement in the last 6, 7 years in terms of how that's going as an
Mhm.
industry. And since then, I've been basically looking at different areas of how to supplement that. So organisations like the ACB, Co-Action, Best, they all run kind of supplementary courses or parallel courses that kind of feed into that knowledge base. So in that point in time, over say in the last 2 years since I've been at Block, a lot of the courses I've been working on or taking part on have basically been help supplementing the information I've garnered through
Mhm.
looking and working through Passivhaus.
Right. So not an easy fix.
No.
No, excellent. Okay. Okay, so in terms of the emerging philosophy here for sustainability for our clients at Block Architects, you as the head of sustainability are pretty key and paramount in how you're going to drive that forward. So what is our emerging philosophy then for sustainability?
I think in terms of our client base, the key thing is not just forcing sustainability onto people, is getting buy-in.
Mhm.
Buy-in is important because you need to say to the clients, like, we can do what's the standard requirement in terms of the regulations, which are getting better and improving a lot every year. But if they've got an idea of what they want to do, you can't force something onto them that they're not willing to do.
Mhm.
But you need to be able to educate them as well. So it's finding the right clients who are interested in the work, but also finding clients who are open-minded that they might buy in what you're suggesting to them. So that's integral. But also taking your standard working methods and saying, well, okay, we're doing this, but we need to improve it. You're just taking the building regs and you're saying, well, that's the minimum requirement, because that's what they are. They're a minimum requirement to pass. So if you want to improve upon it, then you say, this is what we're doing as an office, and you say, well, let's do things slightly better. Let's do things slightly different. And that's what we're trying to kind of push into the way we're working forward, moving forward.
Okay. So, with that in mind, then, how do you ensure that this new philosophy is upheld throughout the team?
Key things: open discussions. If you're learning something, you talk to them and say, well, this is what I learned on the course. And then also, if you come across something that, if MD's doing anything in the office and you say, I don't agree with that, or you don't understand why it's happening, there's a dialogue there. Like, people working on a certain style or certain typology, things change. So they might be used to doing the detail or doing a certain build up, and then that, if you go, well, actually, we can do this change or use a different material, and it basically, it's maybe a minor change, but it helps to move the office forward.
Yeah, so a bit of education and mentoring. Yeah, okay, cool. What changes then are you predicting for the next 12 to 24 months? We know that Passivhaus Scotland's coming through, but what do you think is going to be the key changes?
Well, there's quite a few things. So the Passivhaus is obviously the main one that a lot of people will be talking about, but the AACB have their own building standard, which is a kind of, it's not a lesser, it's still quite stringent, but it's not as strict in terms of all the requirements. So there's a lot more projects, maybe publicly funded projects, that use AACB standard rather than the Passivhaus standard. And there's also the Passivhaus-certified, where you're basically, if you've got publicly funded money, then you can use that. But these types of projects are there to improve existing buildings. So the standards that you're expecting to take on a traditional building and renovate it, there's a lot of criteria there that you have to meet, obviously, to improve that fabric. But the AACB and the Passivhaus Institute and places like that have their own standards now that basically you can work towards. And I think at a point in time where you're saying, well, we have to meet the building control requirements, you're now sitting going, well, like I said before, it's a minimum standard. How do we improve upon that? And I think there needs to be a discussion about, well, these are all self-funded. A lot of them are self-funded at the moment. So there must be a way of saying, well, how do we get this moving forward? Could it be solving the VAT problem and working on existing buildings? Because that 20% could make or break how a project moves forward. Things like that, but I don't see that as a short-term discussion. I think the introduction of all these other standards help with finding a solution that's of a higher standard than the regulations. So that's something that I find through some of the seminars and webinars, there's a lot more people interested in that now than just saying, well, we're working to the regulations but there's no enforcement on it, rather than just meeting the building control requirements.
Okay. Well, you've touched then on existing buildings. So, how easy or difficult are you finding it just now to convert and upgrade, old and existing buildings?
I think again, going back, it's the client buy-in. The client's bought a building. There's a lot of unknowns within an existing building, and you've got a certain pot of money. So if the client's wanting to upgrade the building to the best they can, then they'll have that mindset set out from the get-go. But if you turn and you try and force that onto them, it's very difficult to say, but you need to do this, because there is no physical need to at the moment. It's the building control asks for improvement or betterment if possible, and that is the right thing to do. If you're working within a listed building, you can't force changes onto a building that might make it worse. But if there is a situation where you can make the building better through soft touches and things like that, then that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't just be taking the building and then put lipstick on it, saying we've made this building better, but in fact it's still leaky. And you're heating the building and it's just pouring straight out the windows and the gaps and things like that. So there's always something you can do to make the sustainability of an existing building better. That's making sure you do the right things for that building.